Have you ever gotten stuck in that thought loop where you just you can't stop thinking about something, you just keep overthinking and overthinking, and it just turns into this big anxiety spiral?
Oh, absolutely. And it's something that I think we all struggle with from time to time. It's that feeling of being completely overwhelmed by our own thoughts.
Yeah, like your brain just decides to have its own little party and you weren't invited.
Exactly. The worst part is you're trapped in there with all those thoughts just swirling around.
Well, in this deep dive, we're going to try to figure out how to stop that party.
We can at least try to turn down the music a little bit, right?
Totally. So we've been checking out this really cool YouTube video by Thewizardliz called How to Stop Overthinking.
I've seen her videos. She's great.
Yeah, she's so down to earth, and she actually talks about her own experiences with overthinking. So her advice feels really practical.
Yeah, you can tell she's been there. And that's always helpful when you're looking for advice.
Right. So she gives a ton of different tips and techniques in this video. So we're going to kind of break it down and pull out the most actionable insights and hopefully help you guys gain a little more control over your thoughts.
Because let's be honest, when you're stuck in that overthinking mode, it can really affect your whole life.
Oh, totally. It impacts how you focus your mood, your relationships, everything.
It's like this constant background noise that you just can't seem to shut off.
All right, so let's jump into Liz's advice. One of the things that really stood out to me was this idea that nobody truly knows you.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I'm curious to hear more.
So she uses this example of people watching her videos. Like, some people might be totally inspired by what she says, while others might not connect with it at all.
Right. Everyone's coming to it with their own experiences and their own perspectives.
Exactly. So it's the same Liz, but people are creating their own versions of her in their heads.
So basically what she's saying is that there's always going to be this gap between how we see ourselves and how other people see us.
And that's okay. Like, we don't need to constantly try to read everyone's minds and figure out what they're thinking about us.
It's so freeing when you realize that you can't control other people's perceptions.
It takes a lot of pressure off, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's another piece of advice that resonated with you?
Okay, so this one really hit home for me. She talks about the importance of voicing your thoughts in the moment.
Instead of letting things build up.
Exactly. She uses this example of her sister who noticed that Liz is really good at expressing herself calmly and directly whenever something's bothering her.
That's a great skill to have. It can prevent so much unnecessary drama.
Right. Like, if something's bugging, you just say it politely instead of letting it fester and turn into this huge resentment.
It's like when you hold on to something for too long and then you end up overreacting to something small because all that pent-up frustration just explodes.
I've totally been there. But Liz makes this great point that voicing your thoughts in the moment helps to clear your mind. You're not carrying around all this baggage.
Like a mental detox.
Totally. She says she doesn't want to be lying in bed at night, replaying conversations and wishing she'd said something.
Oh, that's the worst. It's like you can't escape your own thoughts even when you're trying to sleep.
So her advice is basically like, hey, if something bothers you, address it in a respectful way and then move on.
Makes so much sense.
Okay. What else did you find helpful in her video?
Well, I really liked her emphasis on journaling and creative outlets as ways to process emotions.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic. But it's a classic for a reason, right?
Totally, because sometimes you just need to get those thoughts out of your head and onto something tangible.
She actually recommends journaling right before bed, like just dumping everything out on paper.
I could see how that would be helpful. It's like a brain cleanse before you try to sleep.
Right, and it doesn't have to be just writing. You could do painting, drawing, anything that helps you express those feelings.
Whatever works for you. The point is to find a healthy way to release those thoughts and emotions.
Exactly. Now, this next part I thought was really insightful. She talks about the importance of identifying the root cause of your overthinking.
Like what actually triggering those thoughts.
Yeah, because oftentimes it's not just about the surface level situation. It's something deeper, a fear or an insecurity that's driving those anxious thoughts.
She gives that example of someone overthinking a delayed text message and how it might be connected to a fear of abandonment.
Right, so it's not really about the text, it's about something much bigger.
So basically we need to become like thought detectives.
Exactly. When you find yourself spiraling, ask yourself, okay, what am I really afraid of here? What's the underlying issue?
It might take some digging, but it's worth it. Because once you identify that root cause, you can start to address it directly.
Instead of just trying to band-aid the surface level symptoms.
Okay, so once you've kind of figured out what's triggering your overthinking, how do you actually stop it?
Well, Liz gives some really practical tips on that too. One of them is to focus on the facts, not just your feelings.
That's a good one because sometimes our feelings can really distort our perception of reality.
Totally. Like when you're anxious, it's easy to jump to the worst case scenario, even if there's no evidence to support it.
She uses the example of not getting a job and how it's easy to feel like you're a failure. But the fact is, maybe you just weren't the right fit for that particular role.
Or maybe someone else had more experience. It doesn't mean you're not qualified.
Right. So it's about separating the objective facts from our emotional interpretations.
Which can be really hard when you're in the middle of an anxiety spiral.
Oh, for sure. But that's why it's so important to practice this skill. Like anytime you catch yourself catastrophizing, try to step back and look at the situation logically.
Okay, so here's a cool technique that Liz learned from her therapist. It's called the bubble technique.
Oh, I've heard of that. Isn't it for dealing with negative thoughts?
Yeah, so basically you visualize each negative thought as a bubble, and then you imagine yourself poking it with a needle so it pops and disappears.
I love that imagery. It's such a simple but effective way to deal with those intrusive thoughts.
Right, it's like you're not giving them the power to take over your mind.
You're just acknowledging them and then letting them go.
Another key point that Liz makes is that overthinking doesn't actually change anything.
It's so true. We can spend hours worrying about something, but it doesn't actually solve the problem.
She literally says, what if does not exist?
Because we can get so caught up in those what if scenarios that we forget to focus on what's actually happening right now.
And sometimes we can even create the negative outcomes we're so afraid of just by focusing on them so much.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So instead of dwelling on the problem, Liz encourages us to shift our energy towards finding solutions.
That's a much more productive approach. It's about taking action instead of just stewing in anxiety.
She talks about how successful people tend to identify a problem and then immediately start brainstorming solutions.
It's like that saying, don't just stand there, do something.
Exactly. And she ties this back to her own experiences of being in survival mode, where you have to constantly think on your feet and find ways to overcome challenges.
So basically what she's saying is that action is the antidote to overthinking.
Love that. Okay, so this next piece of advice is so important. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
It can be hard to admit when we need help, but it's a sign of strength, not weakness.
Liz actually talks about how she wouldn't be where she is today without the help of others.
It's a good reminder that we're not meant to go through life alone.
Totally. Everyone needs support sometimes, whether it's from friends, family, a therapist, whoever you trust.
Just talking to someone about what you're going through can make a huge difference.
Now, Liz also brings up something that I think a lot of us overlook: the role of physical factors in overthinking.
Like our physical health can actually affect our mental state.
Exactly. She specifically mentions that tiredness and lack of sleep can make overthinking so much worse.
Makes sense. When you're exhausted, your brain doesn't have the energy to regulate itself properly.
So getting enough sleep is crucial for managing anxiety.
Sleep is like the reset button for our brains.
Totally. Okay, so what about some specific techniques for calming the mind and body?
Well, Liz recommends things like breathing exercises, yoga, and meditation.
Oh, those are all great. I love a good deep breathing exercise.
She actually describes a specific technique called diaphragmatic breathing, where you focus on breathing deeply into your stomach.
It's supposed to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is like your body's natural relaxation response.
It's like sending a signal to your brain that everything is okay.
And yoga can be really helpful too because it combines physical movement with mindfulness.
It's a great way to release tension and calm the nervous system.
And even just a few minutes of meditation each day can make a difference.
It helps you become more present and less caught up in your thoughts.
Liz also suggests spending time in nature and doing relaxing activities as ways to interrupt those overthinking patterns.
Oh, that's my favorite kind of advice. It's like a prescription for self-care.
Right? Like go for a walk, watch the sunset, play with your pet. Anything that brings you joy and helps you relax.
Because when you're relaxed, it's much harder to get caught in those anxiety spirals.
Now, this next point from Liz is one that I've really been trying to embody. She talks about trusting that life has a way of working itself out.
That's a hard one, especially for us overthinkers.
I know, but she shares her own experiences of how so many things in her life haven't gone according to plan, but looking back, they were all valuable lessons that led her to where she is now.
Like that saying, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, and it's not about being passive. It's about having faith that even when things are tough, there's a bigger picture unfolding.
It's about surrendering to the journey, even if we don't know where it's going.
And she ties this into the idea of accepting what wasn't meant for you.
Like if something didn't work out, it might be because something even better is on the horizon.
And this can apply to anything: jobs, relationships, opportunities.
It's about releasing that attachment to what we thought we wanted and being open to what might be.
And she makes a really important point that not everyone is going to like you, and that's okay.
Trying to please everyone is a recipe for disaster.
It's exhausting, and it takes away from your own authentic self.
She also talks about this idea of a lack mentality, where we focus on what we don't have instead of appreciating what we do have.
And she challenges us to think bigger. Like, look at all the incredible things humans have accomplished.
We can literally build spaceships and skyscrapers.
So why do we put these limitations on our own potential?
It's time to ditch that lack mentality and embrace our own awesomeness.
Absolutely. Now, another big topic that Liz tackles is perfectionism.
The bane of my existence.
Right. It can be so paralyzing because perfection is this unattainable ideal.
And it's totally subjective. What's perfect to one person might not be to another.
So Liz encourages us to take action even if it's not perfect.
Progress over perfection.
Love that. And she makes the point that your passion and belief in what you're doing is more important than achieving some arbitrary standard of perfection.
Because even if someone doesn't like what you create, if you're proud of it, that's what matters.
And this ties into her final piece of advice, which is to remember that you are not defined by the opinions of others.
So powerful. We need to stop giving other people so much power over our self-worth.
She talks about how she used to be really affected by negative feedback from teachers and parents and exes, but she realized that their opinions don't define her.
It's like we need to build our own internal validation system that's not dependent on external approval.
And she encourages us to practice self-affirmation to remind ourselves of our strengths and our worthiness.
Because ultimately, we are the ones who get to decide how we see ourselves.
And to wrap it all up, Liz reminds us of the importance of limiting social media comparison.
Oh, that's a big one. Social media can be such a breeding ground for insecurity and overthinking.
Because everyone's presenting this curated version of their lives.
It's like the highlight reel without all the bloopers and behind-the-scenes messiness.
Exactly. So it's easy to get caught up in this feeling of like, I'm not enough or I'm too late.
Like that saying, the grass is always greener on the other side.
But Liz encourages us to focus on gratitude for what we have in our own lives instead of constantly comparing ourselves to others.
Why? Because comparison is the thief of joy.
And her final message is so simple, yet so powerful. She reminds us to trust the process.
To have faith that things will unfold as they're meant to.
And to surrender to the journey, even if we don't know where it's going.
Because sometimes the most beautiful destinations are the ones we never planned for.
So true. Well, that's a wrap on our deep dive into Thewizardliz's wisdom on how to stop overthinking.
We hope you found some helpful tips and insights along the way.
And remember, you're not alone in this journey. We all struggle with overthinking from time to time.
But with a little self-awareness and some practical strategies, you can gain more control over those thoughts and create a calmer, more peaceful mind.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.